Alabama, Georgia. Epic battle we've all been waiting for at the SEC championship game in Atlanta. The Bulldogs have the best defense in all of college football. It's not even close. They have the consensus number one team as well at 12-0. Alabama, those scuffling at times, 11-1, Western Division champs at number 3 in the college football playoff rankings. Who will win it? Well, the common opponents say this. Like the video, share the videos out on social media, subscribe right here. Best discussion, debate, and analysis because of your participation, your engagement. So please lock it in during bowl season and college football playoff time in particular. Let's get right to it. Let's match up the 4 opponents that both Alabama and Georgia faced in the 2021 season. Georgia, Auburn. I'm going to put these games in order of what I see as the most significant matchups. Because Alabama just played Auburn, it is the most valid set of data points and performance on the field. And then the Georgia-Auburn game was a pretty decent matchup, at least for the way Georgia is annihilating just about everybody. At least the Tigers stood up to the Bulldogs physically. Georgia won it handily, though, 34-10. Stetson Bennett, 231 through the air, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Ladd McConkey had a nice game for the Dogs, 5 catches for $135 and a touchdown. Zamir White, 18 carries, 79 yards, and 2 touchdowns for Georgia. The Dogs sacked Bo Nix 4 times. Auburn could only get the ground game going for 46 measly yards on 29 rushing attempts. That's 1.6 yards per carry, and one of the best backs in the SEC, Tank Bigsby, only 10 carries for 28 yards. Georgia dominated the second half and pulling away from Auburn 34-10. Much different story for Alabama. They were fortunate, and they came through in clutch time on the Plains to pull out a 4 overtime win against Auburn after trailing for much of the game and losing in the fourth quarter 10-0. Bama 24, Auburn 22. Auburn led again 10-0 as late as the 8-minute mark in the third quarter, and Auburn led until 24 seconds left in the game when Bryce Young threw the game-tying touchdown to Ja'Cory Brooks to send it into overtime. That culminated a 97-yard drive. Bryce Young coming of age, showing again his worth, his clutch play. And then the game winner to John Mechie in the fourth overtime on the brilliant route to the left pylon. The Auburn defensive line dominated this game, completely outplayed Alabama's front line in this one. Jamison Williams had 2 catches for 43 yards. Then he was ousted for targeting, so he was ejected in the first half. Fortunately, that will not impact the SEC championship game. Brian Robinson left the game early as well after running 15 times for 64 yards. Tank Bigsby, the Alabama Crimson Tide, locked him down. 29 carries for 63 yards for Tank. TJ Finley hobbling along on one leg for this entire game was ineffective against Alabama, allowing the Tide to come back in the fourth quarter. The big play of the game was, of course, Tank Bigsby running out of bounds on a 2nd and 10 play in which he almost gained the first down. He ran to the left sidelines, broke free for a first down that would have basically iced the game, but unfortunately ran out of bounds. Unfortunately for Auburn, that cost them 40 seconds of game time. That allowed Bryce Young, with about 90 seconds left on the clock from his own 3-yard line, to take the Tide down the field, not the game at 10. The tremendous pitch and catch between he and Brooks was a thing of beauty with 24 seconds left to play. Bama pulled out the Iron Bowl to keep their playoff hopes alive, 24-22. How about the Arkansas matchup? Again, Georgia pummeling the Hogs 37-0. A week after Arkansas looked so impressive against Texas, they go to Athens and they were shell-shocked. They faced the crowd, they faced the defense, and they looked like a deer in headlights. So Georgia just took this game away from Arkansas early and just were the dominant force in this one. And Arkansas, again, did not look prepared for the moment, for the stage. This was a complete beatdown. Arkansas was stunned. They couldn't run their offense. And Georgia, in these first 2 big games of the of the season against Clemson and Arkansas were not just statistically dominant, but you had to watch it for yourself to see the Dogs just blowing up plays in the backfield on a regular basis, not even allowing the Arkansas offense, in this case, to get the offense going to start to run the play. They didn't just stop the plays. They pushed guards in the backfield. They wrecked the place. Outrushed Arkansas 273 to 75. Zamir White had 2 rushing touchdowns. KJ Jefferson had his least productive game by far this season. He's had a great season for the Hogs as they have marched on to an 8-4 record. But on this day, Arkansas crushed at Georgia 37-0. Well, just a few weeks ago, Arkansas went to Tuscaloosa. Usually a difficult place to play, and usually a place where Arkansas gets stomped, as they have by multiple scores 5 consecutive times and losing 15 straight to the Tide. But once again, Bama had to survive 42-35. Bryce Young set an all-time passing record at Alabama with 559 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions as well. Also, he put down the second most prolific yardage total in the history of the SEC in passing. KJ Costello at Mississippi State against LSU last year. Jamison Williams, his number 1 target, 8 catches for $190 and a touchdown. I make that 3 touchdowns for Jamison Williams. A touchdown by John Mechie, who caught 10 for 173, as Bama amassed 671 yards of total offense, but they needed all of it to hold off the Hogs, who were still in the game until they kicked an onside kick out of bounds with 1:02 left on the clock. KJ Jefferson threw for 326 yards and 3 touchdowns. Bama gave up 10 of 19 third down conversions in this one, and third and fourth down conversions for Arkansas, 10 of 19, as Bama hangs on to defeat the Hogs 42-35. Now let's look at the matchups against Florida, and once again we see a theme. Georgia crushed Florida 34-7. It was a close game until just minutes left in the first half. Georgia led 3-0. Defensive struggle, obviously. And then came the Bulldog blitz. Nolan Smith with a forced fumble turned into a James Cook touchdown run to make it 10-0. Then Smith had an interception, which was turned into a Stetson Bennett to Kyrus Jackson 36-yard touchdown to make it 17-0. And then, bam, Nakobe Dean, pick 6, and it went from 3-0 to 24-0 at the half. And this represented the most scoring in less than 90 seconds at the culmination of a half, going back to 2015 in Boise State against Utah State. Florida didn't score until 2:49 left in the game. They put up the 10 points later, the 1 touchdown late, actually, to make it 34-7. So Florida kept its scoring streak alive that goes back to the mid-'80s, but in all intents purposes, a complete rout after that flurry by the Dogs late second quarter. Georgia 34, Florida 7. Earlier in the season, at a point in which many of us thought that Florida might be a factor in the SEC, the Gators took the Tide down to the wire in the Swamp, 31-29. So Bama jumped out early in this one, 21-3. Florida ripped off scoring drives of 79, 99, and 75 yards to pull almost even, unfortunately, for the Gators. They missed the PAT, so that put them down by 12. So then they were playing catch-up from there. And then once they scored the touchdown to make it 31-29, they had to go for 2 with 3.5 minutes left. They lined up in a wrong formation. The play blew up, and Bama hung on 31-29. Bryce Young, 240 yards and 3 touchdowns in this one. Brian Robinson carried it 15 times for 78 yards. The Bama defense, though, gave up 245 yards rushing to Florida in this one at 5.7 yards per carry and 4 rushing touchdowns. Offensively, Florida outgained Bama 440 to 331, but the Tide won it and escaped the Swamp 31-29. Our final matchup comparison is Tennessee. Of course, the rival of Alabama. They always play as a non-division opponent, and of course, in the SEC Eastern Division against Georgia. The Dogs trailed for the first time this season at 7-0 after giving up a touchdown drive to Tennessee. In fact, Josh Heupel and the Vols hit up Georgia for 2 scoring drives at the start of the game from 77 and 76 yards. First a touchdown, then a field goal. Tennessee led 7-0. They also led 10-7. Then the Georgia defense took over. 6 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, scoring 27 consecutive points. The Tennessee rushing game going into that game against Georgia had been devastating against the likes of South Carolina and Missouri and others. But against the Dogs, same old story. 36 rushing attempts for 55 yards. That's 1.5 yards per carry. Georgia, on the other hand, got the running game going as usual. 274 yards on the ground at 6.7 yards per carry. Georgia went down early, 7-0 and 10-7. And then they took care of the Vols easily, 41-17. Tennessee took on Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and it was a good game for 3+ quarters. Bama won at 52-24 going away, but the Tide led this one just 24-17 early fourth quarter. Bryce Young, 371 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks in this one. He hit a couple 100-yard receivers in, of course, Jamison Williams with 123 and John Mechie 121. Hendon Hooker with a nice game for Tennessee, 3 touchdowns and a pick, 282 yards passing. Tennessee, though, could not run it against the Tide. 27 carries for 65 yards, just 2.4 yards per carry. Bama dominated on the stat sheet. 33 first downs to 10 for Tennessee. Also, third down efficiency, Bama 15 of 20. Tennessee 2 of 13. The Tide outgained Tennessee by 227 yards. But Tennessee hit on big plays to stay close through 3 quarters, 24-17, before the Tide took it away from there and won it in Tuscaloosa 52-24. So here's the culmination of 4 quality opponents here. You would say that Arkansas would be the best team and maybe Auburn right there. The Tigers did defeat the Razorbacks in Fayetteville, but you've got 2 good football teams in Arkansas and Auburn. You got a team in Florida that was playing well early in the season once they had taken Bama down to the wire and were playing okay through the first half of the season. We know that they came off the rails. Tennessee, much improved, but still not one of the better teams, but they finished at 7-5. So you've got 4 teams that are roughly top 25 to 40 in the nation, something in that range. And Georgia just played so much better against them than Bama. Look at it. Georgia blew out Auburn. They controlled the game. They won 34-10. Bama survived. They were, I don't want to say lucky. They were fortunate. They took advantage of Auburn mistakes late in the game to pull out a game that they should not have won in 4 overtimes. Georgia, Arkansas, Dogs blew them out 37-0. The Hogs stayed in the game, had a chance to win. Bama was the better team, no doubt, but still a 42-35 game as the Hogs were right there. Against Florida, Georgia, once they got going late second quarter with that flurry of 21 points in 1 minute, bam, 24-0 at half. They go on to an easy win, 34-7. Bama struggled at the Swamp, led 21-3, almost gave up the lead. Had it not been for a missed PAT, Florida would have been kicking the game time PAT at the end of the game. And Bama survived 31-29. And the same thing in a little different form with Georgia defeating Tennessee after going down 7-0 and 10-7, 41-17. So they controlled that game. They dominated that game. They handily beat Tennessee. Bama, for the first 3 quarters, struggled with Tennessee before pulling away 52-24. 4 quality opponents. Georgia manhandled all of them or annihilated them. Bama had a competitive game with all of them. The most dominant effort was against Tennessee, but against everybody else, struggled to win, especially against Auburn just 1 week ago. Bama's a 6.5-point dog. They're an underdog for the first time in 93 games. Georgia, Alabama, your thoughts down below, and keep it locked in here at the Voice of College Football, SEC.